Welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 115. So, today I'm going to be talking about the ultimate selfie. So this was a shot I took. I'll explain more in a minute. But basically, there was a sort of sense of how many of me could I fit into one picture and still make vaguely coherent. Can you guess how many of me are in here? See you frantically trying to count them up. All will be revealed in a little while. Also, what we're going to be talking about is a little bit later we're going to be doing the critique section. I've had 3 people send in images for critique. Rosemary sent in this photo of a bird. She's also sent me the original, and she's wondering about how to make it kind of stand out from the background a little bit more. Additionally, Nadia sent in this one, taken at Whitby, and she's used a particular kind of filter which has kind of made the colour zing somewhat, looking for a little bit of feedback on that. And then Dipti Mahi sent in this particular, this portrait, and is also looking for a little bit more feedback. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. See you in a moment. So, yes, here we are. So what about this notion then of the ultimate selfie? What's all that about? In essence, what happened was a few months ago, I was in conversation with Dumfries and Galloway Life magazine. Now, some of the more regular viewers will have known that I periodically do work for them. Actually, before we get to that, let's say hello. Sorry, in such a kind of rush to kind of get all the bits sorted out. We're here, live, YouTube. Leave me a comment. Say hello. Tell me where you're from. Tell me what the weather's like doing your way. Apparently here, in the next couple of days, we're going to be having a mega heat wave, the likes of which the UK hasn't seen before, with temperatures possibly going up as high as 40 degrees Celsius. Now, I know for some of you in India that's just a walk in the park, but for here in the UK it has never reached that kind of temperature before. Even up here in Scotland, in this little corner of Scotland, we're looking at potentially reaching 28 or 29 degrees, which is pretty damn sweltering. So, I don't know what it's like around the rest of the world, but anyway, let's see. Well, I can see we've got a few people in here already. Oh, Melissa says hi from North Carolina. Jackie says hello from South Africa. John says hello again from Columbus, Ohio. We're getting a bit of rain today. May Britt saying hello from a windy Copenhagen. Roy is saying greetings all from West Yorkshire. Meg is saying hello everyone. And Maggie is saying warm in CD today on the verge of a heat wave. And Rosemary is saying good morning. Hope you don't all melt to the Ayres family. Yeah, well, to be honest, we're highly unlikely to melt here because the way our house is constructed, it looks from the outside, from the front of the house, it looks like a 2-storey terraced house, but it is in fact 3 stories. There's a story below street level. Now, the garden is also, you can go out into the garden, it's at the garden level, which is like a story below again. But it's kind of, so that's our living area, and it's kind of a bit like I always kind of think of a cellar in some ways. It might have been a cellar at one point. But it's northwest facing. The sun only gets into it for a few minutes after about 8:30 for about 4 weeks of the year in the height of summer. So it's cold, and it doesn't matter. It could be 50 degrees outside, and down in that room you would still be putting on an extra sweater and wondering if it was okay to put the heating on. So we don't have to overly worry about overheating. Having said that, at night time we do sleep upstairs where it will be a bit warmer, and that's more likely to be a bit of a problem. Anyway, so what are we talking about? So today, to go back then, today, ultimate selfie. So yes, point is that a few months ago I was in conversation with the editor, Andrea, of Dumfries and Galloway Life magazine. And this year, 2022, is Scotland's Year of Stories. And we got into a bit of a conversation about the idea of maybe doing a feature, because so much of my photography is narrative storytelling photography, about how you can use photography as a storytelling medium, and whether I could put an article together, supply a few photos. And that's all very well. So I said, yes, great idea, happy to do that. And then I suddenly thought, oh, I kind of need a new portrait. They want to have a photo of me in there somewhere. And my portraits were all pre-COVID, so they're kind of a bit out of date. And then I started thinking, but also, not only that, but in the last couple of years, because I was in lockdown with COVID, I wasn't really doing much in the way of new, interesting, a bit more kind of spectacular photography, or sort of certainly a bit more thought through. So I thought, well, could I combine the both? I've toyed with the idea for a while of doing that kind of fun self-portrait where you have more than one of you in the photo. And now you can sometimes do that with uses of cameras and screens and mirrors and what have you. But I quite like the idea of how many of me could I fit into a single image. And ultimately then I ended up creating this one. So this was done. This was done back in the end of March. There's a road, a kind of a wee back road that runs off, and where there's not a lot of traffic. What I wanted to do was kind of get out there around about sunset. The idea that it would sort of look like it was supposed to be some kind of photo shoot going on, where I'm both the model and I'm the photographer, but at the same time I'm taking the photo. And so I kind of set up this space here. So how did I go about doing this? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to run through the photos that I actually took. I'll take you through the whole sequence of photos from start to finish of each one as I kind of honed and refined the setup. And then I'm going to take you to the Photoshop file and talk you through the different stages of what I did for kind of sticking them together. So that's the kind of plan. Now, okay, let's just do a little quick thing here. How many of me are there in this? Have you managed to work it out yet? Let's say, so what we've got then, we've obviously got the kind of main me here. Oh, what's that doing? Close that. Don't want that. We've got the me with the sunglasses and the leather coat. So that's one. Then we've got two photographers here, 1, 2, so that's 3. We've got another photographer here, 4. We've got a me setting up the light in the background, so we've got 5. We've got a me doing a selfie in the background there, 6. Leaning on the car door, 7. Sitting behind the wheel, 8. And sprawled across the bonnet, 9. Except there is a 10th, if anybody was looking close enough, which is if we go back to the selfie, and then of course is the me in the camera as well. So 10 of me in the one photo. Quite a bit of fun doing that. So that's kind of that was the image, and ultimately it ended up when we come to, so this is Dumfries and Galloway Life magazine, and this is the issue that's out now. It's the the August issue, number 117. Rather nicely, they also took one of my other photos to use as front cover photo of Tony Bonning Storyteller. And somewhere in here, I think it was page 112. Yeah, there we go. They opened a double page spread of the story with this particular picture. So that was great fun. This article turned out to be far more fun than I have to have a wee smug moment. Allow me a wee smug moment. I thought they would maybe include 3, 4, maybe 5 pictures. I sent them about 11 or so. In the end, they included 10. So we then have a picture of me doing the podcasts, photo shoot I'm going to talk about in a few weeks' time, kind of cinematic road trip style photo, one with hands here. They then did a double page spread of the artists gathering, which I've talked about before. Another double page spread of the in-house chocolates, which again I've talked about before. A couple of extra photos here, another one down here, which I'm going to talk about in a few weeks. And the Wave Blues Band, which I think I talked about earlier in the year as well. Oh, and not forgetting photo of Meg there. Remember that one? Remember when we were doing about still life, and then I was talking about doing in the style of the old masters? Well, that's a photo of Meg they included there. So in the end, it was a 10-page spread with 10 photos in it. So yeah, I kind of felt a bit well chuffed with that. So to go back then to the ultimate selfie. Oh, Rosemary said, that's such a fun image, clever way to address the idea of taking a selfie. Thank you, Rosemary. So this, yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. The idea was to just be fun, to do a bit of tongue in cheek, to kind of have to make people smile. And so it was a combination of that kind of trying to be amusing, but at the same time trying to stretch myself a bit technically as well. Now, my original idea was to do one in the living room, and I had all sorts of ideas of sitting on, having two or three of me sitting on the sofa, maybe one of me kind of half lying upside down, or one of me kind of leaning against another one of me, have one of me coming down the stairs, one of me sitting by the fire, another one watching TV, all this kind of stuff. In the end, when I started kind of setting it up and looking it through the lens, it just wasn't doing it for me at all. So then there was this other idea of going out and finding a bit of deserted road to set up on. So let me just find the see if I can find the folder here where I did the image. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through and I'm going to show you literally the whole sequence of photos that I took from start to finish before I then talk about how I blended them together. So this was a kind of first very quick shot here. In fact, actually, I wonder if I can just allow me to, not that one, details pane, just to give you. So what I've done, I've set the camera on a tripod in the middle of the road. My Mini is parked just slightly off in a little bit of a lay-by or passing place. The setting here I've got is 1/20th of a second, 100 ISO, f11. So I wanted to do f11 because and it's on a wide angle lens. So I've got this a 12mm wide. Now, I wanted f11 because I wanted to get everything in focus. I knew that when I was going to be doing the photograph, I could be standing quite close to the camera and I could be quite far away from the camera, and I wanted to make sure each of me was going to be in focus every time. So I knew it was going to have to be something like an f11, f13 or something on the wide angle lens in order to make sure as much was going to be in focus as possible. At this point though, what we can immediately see is that the sky is blown, everything's kind of too bright. So next thing I did then was adjusted it and to this one to 320th of a second at f11. And now we've got a better sky, kind of a bit dark though, not really getting everything in. I adjust the angle slightly. Now I start playing around a little bit. That one's 160th of a second. And then we go to, what's that? 100th of a second. So I'm kind of toying around to sort of see if I can find the right kind of balance. Trying to get the sky right. Now at this point then what I've done is I've now gone to set up a couple of lights. So I've got a flash over here and I've got a flash with this big softbox over here. And there you see, now I've connected them up to make them, so just to see whether they're firing. So we can see flash on a stand here, or speed light, and another one in the big softbox here. So those ones are at, what have I got that? So I've decided at that point, that's 400th of a second at f11. That's not quite bright enough to fit me in. So I'm then playing around with the strength of the flash. I'm playing around with trying to get just that combination of ambient light and the power of the flash. So how much of me and the Mini and the surrounding area is going to be lit by the lights and how much is going to be lit by the ambient light and the sun behind, but at the same time trying to balance out the fact that if I have it too bright to show up everything, then the sun's going to be kind of blowing out the sky as well. So there comes a point where I'm already realizing that I may in fact have to take the sky from one photo, and I'm not just going to be sort of putting different me's together, I'm also going to have to put a different sky together. But first of all, I've got to try and find out. Now, another aspect of this was my first idea for this shoot wasn't me standing in the middle of the road. My first idea was it was going to be me sitting on the edge of the Mini here, like this, with one foot up on the tyre, and then I was going to have people photographing me here. So at the moment I'm trying out just to kind of get the right balance. Here you can see again I've gone too bright now. And then I'm trying a couple of other things. So I've sort of moved there, I've moved to the side, behind the car. Now what I'm trying here is a couple of different shots of what it would be like if me was leaning against the car here. Where would these other photographers be pointing their cameras? So each time I'm setting the camera on a 10-second delay, running round, all the lights going off, then I'm running back again. So I'm trying to sort of create several so that I can choose some and then kind of with the idea of cutting them out and putting them back later. Now, at this point, we see there's a sudden kind of shift of direction a little bit. And part of what's happened here is I've had traffic come along, cars come along, and I've had to kind of get out of the road and then go and get back in the road again afterwards. And at this point, I suddenly realised I wasn't entirely sure the exact place where I put the tripod. I kind of guessed it, so I put it here. And then after that, I made a couple of little markings on the road with a few kind of distinctive pieces of stone or wood bark, so that I knew where to put the tripod back. You find these things out as you go and you suddenly realise you've made a mistake and haven't thought it fully through. So this then was actually going to be my pose shot. So I was going to, here I am kind of pretending that, I've been doing this kind of really cool shot, foot resting on here, leather coat, shades. And then those other kind of photographer shots were going to be the ones that were around. However, there was a problem at this point. When I finally got round to doing this bit, and I looked in the back of the camera, I realised basically I was too small for the whole picture, because while the picture might be fine when it's up on a big screen, if you think about the fact that actually a lot of people are looking at things on their phones or on their tablets, if you take this and you shrink it right down, are you really going to be able to make out what it actually is? And I thought, all the little me's that are going to be in it are just going to be tiny. They're going to get lost. So I then sort of started playing around. So move close to the camera over here. Shift over here. I'm starting to think maybe that's looking right. This one here, getting a bit closer to the camera. That one, and then I'm thinking, well, rather than arms crossed, maybe hands in the pocket would work. Different versions. And then I'm sort of, again, now also the other problem is with this one here is that I'm not really being lit very well. I quite like this light on the softbox is creating this nice sort of rim light here. It's lighting up the Mini quite nicely. But this light here isn't getting far enough over. So then I move the flash over to here. And now we've got something. I like the way the light is falling on the jacket. I've also got the backlight here creating a nice little kind of edge light here. We're also just at that point whereby the sun is starting to hit the hill and we're getting a nice... So we're now into the right realms. So I quite like that one. I then try a couple. I wonder whether I'm a bit too narrow. Try posing here and these poses just don't work. The problem is you don't know. You can't see until you've gone back round to the camera and checked and then click another 10-second timer, run back out to take a pose and you go, no, that one doesn't work. Having felt that I've maybe got one of them though, I then sort of set about doing a few more sort of half standing, half crouching. And basically, and then I decided I also wanted that idea of part of the selfie would include me doing a selfie. So a selfie of a selfie in the background there. So I then did that one over there. I did one over here, one over there, one closer up, another one, and then this one over at the back of the car here. And ultimately, that was the one I chose to use. I went back, had one where I was leaning over the car door, which I thought was a fun one. Another one where maybe I was sort of leaning on the tyre, not quite in with the coat and the shades in the way that I had previously. But then I started thinking, actually, the problem with this one is I'm kind of blocking the driver's seat. Now, maybe it would be quite good to actually have me sitting. I did a couple of versions of that. And then I sort of, well, what if I sort of sat in the car? Now, I sat in the car like that, but you've really got to zoom in. You can't really see me. So then what I had to do was I had to get another flash and then sort of stick it on the dashboard and light myself up. But this one is, you can see the light here hitting everything, but it's way too bright. It's burning me out. Again, I don't know until I've got back. And then I adjust that and I get that. And that one looks like a kind of slightly better. So, or that one even better. I'm sort of leaning a bit more out of the, into the car so you can kind of see past me. Having done that, I then now that I know that I'm really going to be going for one where I'm going to be standing in the middle of the road, I try and create these photographers to look like they're photographing somebody standing in the middle of the road, like that. Then, having realised with the sky being burnt out with all of these, I need a darker sky. I then take a few, I dial down everything so that I can get a kind of darker sky in the background, and I'm trying a few different versions of this so that I will be able to add them together afterwards. And then finally, I suddenly thought, oh, actually I should have one where I'm maybe fiddling with the light in the background. So I had this, and swap round to there. Oh, and then I had an idea of what about lying across the bonnet of the car. Not entirely sure why, it just seemed like a funny idea to do at the time. That one I didn't quite seem right, that one looked a bit better. And so that was it. That then was the kind of the collection of the photos. So you can see now that, so what I've got then is I've gone through and I've created probably about 24 or more different poses with the camera pretty much in the same place and the same settings, and then making a couple of adjustments of settings with the idea that I'm going to then have to put these things all together when I get back. And experience with Photoshop tells me that the more similar the settings are from person to person in the background, and if the tripod's in the same place, then the easier it's going to be to actually slot them all together. What have we? Oh, VG's here. Hi, VG. Glad you could make it. Says good evening, all. And Rosemary says sounds like an aerobic workout with all those 10-second runs between the camera and your different poses. Yeah, it was a little bit of that. I have to admit. VG says who can think of self-portrait at this level? I don't know. I probably got the idea from something else I'd seen somewhere else and just ran with my own idea of it. Oh, Maggie says loads of smug points, Kim. Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate that. So, okay, let's now tell you then. Let's just show you. So I've got all these figures and now all these little pictures. So now I'm going to create them in Photoshop. So let's double click on that, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into Photoshop and show you the Photoshop file and then how it all fitted together. So what I did then was I needed a starting image. So I took this one here, which felt like a kind of a good starting point. I quite liked the way the light was falling on the Mini, the light was falling on me, and the kind of layout. So then the next thing I did, now, the only thing you might notice here, in fact, is that the flash pole has got moved a bit. And that's because that actually kind of tied in with a little bit later on. I had to put in another sky, and the flash was in a slightly different place. Well, I decided to move the flash over to just try and get the balance of the picture better. So I had to come back and adjust that. But don't worry too much about that. So the next thing I'm doing then is I'm adding in the driver here. So I've got the whole, I mean, if I take this and we've got that's what the whole bit looked like. But I'm just kind of masking off. I'm just gently painting in. In fact, actually, if I just let's put that on black for a moment. No, not that. That. No, not that. 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 And then, so that's the original photo. But now I've overlaid. I've cut out this little bit here, and then I can just, because it's all in the same place, I can just gently paint this in to where the window was, and it fits fairly nicely. Fairly easy to do. Next one I put in then is this one of me leaning on the door. And I've got to make sure I get the shadows in place as well. Otherwise it doesn't quite look right. Next then, me with the selfie in the background. Now I've got a group here. Now why is that? What happens if I? Yeah. So it turned out the selfie one was slightly darker. You can see then. So I wanted to lighten it up a bit so that it fitted into the background a little bit more. Next up, so I haven't got those ones in. I've then slot this one in, and then we've got this one here. Now, again, it was a little bit darker than the surrounding area, so I used the curves adjustment layer just to lighten it up a fraction so that it could blend in a little bit more easily around. Then we've got this one where I'm putting in another me over here. This one, we've now gone for the lying across the bonnet. This one, oh yeah, we've got me over here adjusting now. Yes, here's a slightly interesting kind of variation. Was originally I had, now where are we? Not that one. That one, yes. Do I go for, I had this one here, but it just felt kind of too squashed in. So I actually then moved the whole lot over, or rather I took one of these from somewhere else, moved the me over onto there, just to create a little bit more of a gap. So this person here wasn't feeling quite so squashed up against the big me here. So all the time that when you're in the editing, you're kind of looking how well is this all balancing out. Then I realized that the sun, I wanted a sun bit where for this one here, the sun's just kind of disappeared behind the horizon or is just coming down to it. But I wanted one, there was another one where the rays were actually coming in. So I kind of brought that in. Then I wanted, the sky felt a bit empty. And there was another one which had a much better sky. So I brought the sky in. But that sky, and this is here now, had this bit of flash on it. But this bit of flash hadn't lined up with the one below. So I then had to, that's why I'd moved the flash stand over earlier, if that all makes sense. Can you keep up? Right. What have we got here? Layer 12. Not entirely sure what layer 12 was. That's what layer 12 is. Right. Let's zoom in. Right, the me selfie is not there. I put one in afterwards. The hidden selfie within the selfie. So, then I'm making more adjustments to backgrounds, putting that one in. Oh yeah, then there was the door. I was very aware that the door was a bit dirty here with sort of dirt and streaks and stuff. So essentially I cleaned that up a little bit, just made that sort of slightly more shiny door, so I wasn't getting distracted by the fact that it sort of had all these kind of dirty streaks running down it. So then I kind of consolidate by pulling all that together. I then also became aware of the fact that because this foot down here didn't have shadow on it, because originally when this photo was taken of the me here, this one wasn't standing in front of it. It just kind of looked like it was sort of hovering in midair. So I actually sort of put in an extra double layer of shadow, even though you wouldn't really get a double layer of shadow, but somehow it just made it look slightly more realistic and slightly less kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. And then finally I kind of go in and do much more of that kind of where you're playing with the clarity bar, the tidy, dodge and burn, and tidying it up and just kind of giving it the finishing touches. And then there was the last kind of little bit here where I didn't feel the light was quite right on my face, so I kind of, again, a little bit of dodge and burn on that to fix that up. And is that, I think that's where we go. Oh yeah, a little darken down the sky a little bit, and sort of going in and polishing up a couple of little extra details. And ultimately then, that's where we ended up. So that should hopefully give you some kind of sense of all what was involved with that photo. So to how the concept, if you are ever going to do this kind of thing, your main thing is about the idea that if you're doing that selfie where you are setting the timer and you're going to go around and take lots of photos of yourself, you've got to make sure that the camera is going to be in the same place. So it's on the tripod. Try not to make sure you knock the camera at any point, because suddenly you'll find things won't line up. But as long as your camera's on a tripod and you don't kind of knock it, then each time you set it, the photo, and you've got all the settings fixed as well. Because the other thing is that if you've got anything on auto, if you've got an auto exposure or auto ISO, auto whatever, then bear in mind the sun was going down across the course of the time I was there, the sun went from being above the horizon to the edge of the hills to below the horizon. And if the camera adjusted itself every time, then actually it would kind of, the bits wouldn't fit together properly in the end. So make sure you've got your settings right, and you've got to kind of keep to the settings. Then once you've got all your pieces into Photoshop, as long as you've had them all right, it's much, much easier to kind of overlap them. But you've also got, you do have to be prepared for that. I mean, here's actually one of my kind of first, if you like, this was a very quick test shot to sort of see what it would look like. My first original idea with the ultimate selfie. So like I said, it was actually me kind of looking like I was posing while sort of half standing on the tyre of the car. And then I've got one of the photographers there of it. But ultimately, like I say, the problem is that's all very well at that size. But if I shrink this down, actually, let's just minimize that for a moment, to that kind of size, which is how it might be seen on a phone or something like that, then it's really difficult to make out anything that's going on. Whereas at least with this one, you've got a better sense of what's going on before you zoom in. So, you know, you've got to be able to fill the picture as such. So, yeah, like I say, hopefully that gives you a bit of idea, maybe inspires you to have a little bit of fun to go and try out. Because what I am going to do is I'll talk about this again at the end of the program, but I'm going to set a selfie challenge, a self-portrait challenge. Now, you don't have to go out and do 10 of you in the one photo, although if you do, you will get serious extra smug points, it does have to be said. But in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have the selfie challenge, or the self-portrait challenge. So I really want to challenge you to go out and do something interesting on this. Now, we did do a self-portrait challenge before. This is for those who've been around long enough. About 15 months ago, we had a go at doing this. So if you did get involved before, I don't want you sticking in the same photo you did before. We're 15 months on. Hopefully your photography and understanding of photography has come on 15 months. So I want to see you do something else this time. Play with light, play with ideas. What I will do next weekend, next podcast, so episode 116, I will deep dive a bit more into the notion of self-portraiture and selfies, and some kind of the art of self-portraiture, or how you can look. I'll give you different ideas, give you different examples to really kind of explore. So make a start this week. Start having a go, thinking about what you could do for self-portraits. If you've got a chance to go for it, if you've got an idea, just go for it. And then next weekend, next podcast, we can start playing around with the ideas. If you want to send me anything for a bit of feedback, you can. I will be doing a critique section next week. But ultimately, the final one where I want you to send everything it will be for 2 weeks' time. So next week, I will be talking more about self-portraiture, and the week after will be the self-portrait challenge. So I will remind you again of this at the end of the podcast. What else have we got? Nadia's here, says, hi everyone. Hi Nadia, glad you could make it along. Rosemary says, I appreciate your attention to shadows in this. Even such a subtle one, they can make or break the realism. Also your patience to keep experimenting. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you've got to get the shadows and the lighting right, because if people are too busy looking at the edits, if they're thinking that bit doesn't quite fit properly, they're no longer absorbed in the picture. It's a bit like when you're watching a movie. If something just looks a bit plastic or doesn't look out of place, or somebody slams the door and the whole door wobbles, you then become very aware of the fact that you're watching actors on a set rather than being immersed in the movie. And this is always what I tend to feel about with the whole editing process. Your editing needs to be convincing. Your editing needs to be at a point whereby people are not looking at the editing, they're looking at the picture. You want them to be absorbed in the story of the picture, not eyeing up the editing going, oh, well, but that bit doesn't kind of look right. So that's a kind of really important part. And as for the patience to keep going at it, well, or to keep experimenting, if you're not going to keep experimenting, then why are we doing it? We master our photography by doing, but there's so much photography. I mean, we can be doing this for the rest of our lives and we'll never completely master every aspect of it. So the the point of why do we all do photography? Because we find it interesting. Because sometimes we find it frustrating, is sure, but there's a love and a passion, and we want to develop I think there's a lovely thing about the idea of mastery. However far away from it we are, before we even start to feel like we're getting the hang of it, the idea of self-improvement, the idea of trying to get better and better and better at what we do, I think it's I think it's part of the human condition. There's something hardwired into our brain that we want to be able to do this, and we get a certain level of satisfaction each time we kind of reach another little milestone where we feel that's worked, that's actually worked, and especially when it feels like it's worked better than we thought it was going to. Certainly that's the way I kind of feel about it. Okay, so just to remind you then that if you are finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and would like to support them in some way or another, then one of the best ways is buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres, where you can go there, you can buy me a coffee, you can buy me 3, 5, 25, buy me 3,000. Set me up with my own coffee business. That's one of the ways you can support. Another way you can support these as well is invite your friends, help grow this wonderful little community of ours. Now, what we're going to do now then is to move on to the critique section. So, the critique section, this is your chance to get feedback on your photos. We're all busy there taking our photos, but it's really difficult to try and get a proper sense sometimes of how well we've achieved something or how we get past something. Sometimes we kind of reach a block. We know something isn't working, but we don't know exactly what it is or how to get past it. Or sometimes we've taken a photo and we think it's okay, but we don't really know. We put it up on Facebook or Instagram. Our friends tell us it's lovely, but then our friends aren't photographers. So maybe they're just being polite and nice to us, which is lovely. That's what friends are for. But it doesn't necessarily help us improve our photography if our friends are telling us it's great, but actually it isn't really. So where do you get a decent bit of feedback on it? So that's what this corner of the internet was carved out for. So if you want to send me your images for feedback, please do. 2 ways you can do this. We have a Facebook group, also called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. So if you're on Facebook, go to Facebook, type in Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. You will find the Facebook group, join it. Stick your photo in, tell me a little bit about what your sticking points are, where your problems are, and I can include it in a following podcast. If you don't do Facebook, then Kim at my web address, kimayres.co.uk. So just KIM at kimayres.co.uk is another way. Email me the image, and again, tell me what your problems are, tell me what you're trying to get past, and I will do my best to help. Right, so now on to the critique section, and we've had 3 people put in for this. So let me find. So we'll start with Dipti Mahi from India, who's sent in this image. Now they've put it onto Photo Crowd, and where are we? Yep, and managed to get to top 25%, 570th, but feeling like they could have been doing a bit more with it. So Dipti Mahi said, "Hey Kim, I'm sending you this picture for which I'd really like your feedback. Thank you for your help. Lots of love from India." So Dipti Mahi from India occasionally crops up in the in the YouTube comments when they're watching live as Binod Singh. So what we have here, photo. Young woman in black and white. Now, what I did then say was, they emailed me this image. I sent back to say, do you have an original? What was it? What have you converted it to black and white and cropped it, or is this kind of straight out the camera? And what they said was that this has come straight out of the phone. So they put it on a black and white setting, and then shot as is. So it hasn't been cropped and it hasn't been adjusted as such. Now, the first feedback I would give with this is it feels very dark. Now, let's open this in Photoshop for a moment, and I'll just show you the balance. So we can close the ultimate selfie now. So when we come to here, if I go to the levels, now if I click on over here, levels, now although I know you'll just be working with your phone, there are still ways on, even with your phone editing, where you can lighten and darken. But if I go to levels here, what we can see down here is a histogram. And this histogram is showing us the light and the dark. And what we can see is everything is bunched up over on the left here, which means it's very dark. And there's a great big gap over on the right, which is where the lights are. So now you can, with the levels, I can click on this and drag it to the right, and that will make it darker, or I can click in the middle, and that sort of boosts the mid-range things, or I can click over on the right, which is where the lights are. And if I bring that up to just where the line starts here, we can see that actually now sort of gives us a much brighter picture that we can now see. This here just feels way too dark. Now, maybe if you're on your phone itself is kind of boosting the brightness. A lot of phones do. They tend to boost in order to make things look clearer, especially so you can still see your phone on a bright sunny day. But if somebody's looking at it on their computer or maybe their tablet, it's just going to be too dark. So you do have to try and make sure things don't go too dark. Now, you don't want to get it too bright, because if you go too bright, we then sort of blow out the highlights. So you can sometimes, if you've got a bit of software which is giving you a histogram, you can use the histogram here to give you a bit of guidance as to where you should drag that before you start losing detail. So maybe I can even take it up to there. So that gives you, so now the other thing is here, this black and white, we've got sort of funny bits of colour have kind of crept their way in. So having made the adjustment, so what I might just do is actually go to hue saturation and make that a proper black and white, just to kind of make sure I'm not getting odd bits of colour in there. So that's one thing. But what I would really, so the lightness is a first starting point to think of. However, there are two other major things that I would really say here. One is you've cropped in very tight. Now, young woman in the photo here, this then is very much about the eyes. Eyes are really striking, but you've cropped off the chin. We've got no idea where that chin, we don't have a jawline. It feels very kind of squashed in. And what I would say is there's nothing, sometimes you want to get in really close, but you really want to give yourself options. And I would say you are better off stepping back a bit, get the full head into the photo, and then afterwards in your editing, crop in. If you want, crop it, and so you can move about, so you can decide whether you want to have a bit more chin. You might even still decide at the end of it that you don't need that amount of chin, or or you maybe want to go even closer and just have the eyes, or just the eyes and the nose, or something else. Or you might want a bit more hair, or you might want a bit more of that hand, because at the moment this hand here, we've just got a light blob in the corner, which is kind of grabbing our attention a bit and putting us a little bit away from the eyes, which is where the main focus should be. So this hand is slightly distracting. But you've not given yourself the options. So I would say always, if you're, especially when you're kind of at an early stage in your photography, you're better off being further out so you can give yourself the option to crop in, because you can always crop more off. You can't always add stuff on. So if you start in too close, you can't really add more detail afterwards in the editing. But if you start out further, you can crop in a bit. Now, you do have to be careful about starting way out and then cropping in really small, because then you lose detail. But you could certainly have been out a little bit further for this, and I think that would really help. The third thing that I would say with this is, again, to give yourself options, I would say don't use the black and white. Photograph in colour and convert it to black and white. Now, I've done a couple of episodes before now, and if you want to go back, you can even check on the bite-sized ones, where I've got, I think on my YouTube channel, where I talk specifically about 3 or 4 or even 5 different ways you can convert a picture to black and white. And each of those will give you a different mood or feel. In fact, actually, I'll tell you what, let's just to very quickly show you, if I go to, even if I just open up this picture again and zoom in, if I wanted to convert this to black and white, if I go to hue saturation and just drag the saturation to the left, that gives me one kind of black and white. Or if I go to here and I click gradient map, that gives me a different kind of black and white. So from that to that. But gradient map itself also has an option here, for that's perceptual, that's classic. But that's still slightly different to that one. Or there are possibilities where I can go into the channels, and there's a red channel, a green channel, and a blue channel. Now, does that actually, let's go back to there. Right, that's because that's still on. Okay, so blue channel, green channel, red channel. So with things like that, if you say, look at the color of my orange Mini, on the blue channel it's quite dark, on the green channel it's mid-range, and on the red channel it's really bright. So different colors get converted to black and white, lighter or darker, depending on which channel you're using. Now, the point of this lot is not to worry about my particular picture with the Mini, because that's always going to be a color. I've got a particular color palette here which is being used. But for this, it means that you've not had the option. You've let by setting it to black and white before you take the photo, you haven't left yourself the option for different ways of converting to black and white, which might actually give you a better option somewhere along the line than just the existing one that happens to already be there. So basically then, I would say the three things to think about with your photo are, first of all, levels. Make sure it's bright enough, that it's not too dark that it's going to be lost on some people's screens. Secondly, when you're taking the photo, don't start so close in. Get back a little bit more so that you have the option to crop in if you want, but you also have the option to maybe shift the crop slightly. Do you want a little bit more space to the left or the right? You have this, so the editing becomes important. And the third thing is, just like, don't be in so close. Don't set the thing for black and white first, because you've then lost options. Everything about this is about having maximum options available to you so you can improve your photo with the editing. Okay, so that's what I want to say about that. So I hope that helps you, Dipti Mahi. Right, okay, a couple of comments here. VG says, beautiful eyes. I should say hi. Rosemary says, agreed VG, gorgeous eyes. VG also says, one side of the cheek looks a bit stretched, cropping could be better. Either it could be more eyes or more face. So yeah, basically it's back to that idea. Give yourself more to play with beforehand, and then you can play around with your crop and you can play around with your edits afterwards. And then that gives you a lot more options so that you can improve your photography, or you can improve the photo at any rate. Okay, so hope that helps. Next up then, I'm going to talk about Nadia. So Nadia sent in this image and says, I had a lovely week away. I went to the 199 steps in Whitby for a sunset. Critique, comments, welcome. So first thing that struck me about this is, bam, I mean, these colours are loud. They are really hyper saturated. So I asked a little, so in Nadia put this into Facebook, the Facebook group. So I asked Nadia for a couple more questions on this, asking her what settings were. She said, I used a free preset on Luminar 4, and this is, and her DSLR settings were f4, 30 seconds, ISO 50. So it's a 30-second exposure, but she also had a 10-stop ND filter. So that's a bit like having a really thick pair of sunglasses over the lens. So she's then doing a 30-second exposure. So I was kind of curious. It's very difficult to know quite what to do when I can see this. So I asked for the original, and Nadia sent me the original as well, which was great. So this is the original photo, and so this is then with your ND filter. Now, what strikes me, so there's two things here that I start thinking about. The first is this one. Obviously, it's much more colourful than the original. And that's to do with the preset that you've got. So somewhere in there with the editing, you can hit a preset and it just really boosts and oversaturates the colours. And in a situation whereby maybe if you were on guru shots where people are skimming very high speed through their images, this kind of oversaturated look would give you, you maybe sort of score slightly higher in those kind of online crowd vote situations. However, as a standalone photo, as this sort of sits there on my screen here, and I've got quite a large screen, it feels very overcooked to me. So I started thinking also about the fact that you were using an ND filter and a 30-second exposure. But you still end up with the problem of the fact that this photo, if you'd taken this on a 30th of a second, or 50th of a second or whatever, at without the filter, you would probably have still ended up with pretty much the same photo. I'm guessing the reason you used the filter was really what you were wanting to do was get the colours in the sky. However, the part of the problem here is that your filter applies to the whole picture. So if you darken the top part, so you're darkening the sky because that's what you want, you then end up darkening the foreground, and all the foreground gets lost. If you lighten the foreground, you then lighten the sky, and the sky gets lost. It's a little bit slightly with the problem that I had with my Ultimate Selfie. I ended up having to use a different sky from the series to the foreground because I didn't have the right kind of filter. And for this, what you want, I think, is a graded filter. And what happens there is, so you can end up with something like the equivalent of an ND10 at the top, and then it grades out as it goes down. And then specifically what that's going to do is it's going to darken the sky, but it's not going to darken the foreground. And that's going to allow you to balance out much more easily when you're sort of trying to do a sunset kind of picture. Because as we'll notice with this, I mean, again, if I just open this in Photoshop here, if I'm wanting to darken that sky, and let's just do that with curves, and I drag that down here so we get the beautiful colours in the sky, although it's still blown out there, we've actually lost all the foreground. If I want to brighten the foreground enough so we can see it clearly, we've now blown out the sky. So your real option here is to either take two different photos, one which is exposed for the foreground, so you can get a nice kind of brighter foreground, so that's lit well, and to do a second photo from the same place. You got it on, if you're doing 30 seconds, you're presumably using a tripod, and you then darken it, you do a different exposure so that you get the right sky without that bit being blown out, and then you can blend them together afterwards. Sorry, done something wrong there. Right, there we go. And then you can blend them together. And sometimes you can use the software in your editing program to do that, or sometimes you might just do it by hand. But if they're both done from exactly the same angle, then it should be fairly straightforward to do. Or the other thing is to get the filter which is which is graded. So it's like a heavy density filter on the top, and then as it grades down, so it allows you to underexpose for the sky and expose naturally for the foreground, and then that way you will get a much better balance. So I hope that helps, Nadia. I hope that gives you a couple of ideas for the future. I mean, certainly Whitby, I've stood there, I've taken very similar photos. I wasn't there at sunset, but I've taken different kinds of photos. But I know the place, and it's a lovely place, and it's certainly worth going back to and trying that again. But you could also try that in other places as well. So thank you for sending that one in. Meg says that's a gorgeous photo. Right, okay, on to the third one then. I'm going to talk about Rosemary. So Rosemary sent a picture of a female flicker from earlier this spring. So let's just show you Rosemary's picture. And she says the conditions were cluttered and the light was quite drab, which is part of the flicker's secret to camouflage. I would appreciate feedback on my editing. I tried to declutter the background by darkening it and emphasise the bird by lightening her up a bit and adding a wee bit of highlight on the upper left, a barely golden radial filter. But I don't know if I've gone too far or created distractions such as the moss on the stick. I tried several edits that came out either too bland or too contrasty. This is the one that I like the best. Any feedback on the edit is much appreciated. So again, Rosemary sent me the original. So this is the original. Now, if you look at this original photo, this is where you realise the camouflage is working for the bird of flicker. I think Rosemary said it was called. So it's kind of difficult. So this spotted camouflage is sort of blending into the background, and we've got to zoom in quite a bit before we can see the bird clearly. But even though we've zoomed in here, there's not a lot of contrast. So this is what. So this is now the edited version that Rosemary's put in, as opposed to the original. So I think what you've done here is pretty good, to be honest. In essence, there are three kind of key ways to make something stand out from the background, by and large. There might be others sometimes, but short of creating new leading lines and adding new elements or removing existing elements, which might be distracting. Let's just open this in Photoshop for a moment, and I will do a couple of quick edits. I'll just close those two first, just to kind of show you what I mean. So first of all, in order to get, because the photo is about the bird, not about the trees, we need to crop in, which you did. So we'll crop in sort of roughly kind of what you did. I think it was pretty much, say, something like that. No, that wasn't quite IP. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so let's just increase that in size so we can see what we're playing with. And in fact, if I just click there, no, not that one, and back to here. Yeah, not far off, close enough. So one of the ways you can make something stand out from the background is something that was where you went, which is about what you do is you make a contrast. You're looking for a contrast, basically, between one thing and another. And the more stronger the contrast, the stronger something stands out. And so one of the ways you can do that is by contrasting the light. So again, if I do something like curves or levels, let's just grab the curves for the moment, pull that up, lighten that up a little bit, something like that. Maybe actually just drag that a fraction, create a little bit more contrast, something like that in the thing. So the bird is now standing out. The problem is the background has then also become very busy. Just as I've increased the contrast to make, or increased the brightness to make the bird stand out, it's increased the brightness at the same time of the background. So at this point, what you could do is you can use the mask. We take the brush tool, and I can then sort of just darken the background down again, something like that. Now, if you want, you can start doing proper selects and really kind of go in and get the detail around the edges. I'm just doing this very roughly for the point, but I think I've just lightened up that head a little bit more there. So what we can see here then is now, by doing that, the bird stands out much more against the background. So that light dark thing is certainly one of the ways you can go. Now, another option you can do is to make something stand out is the difference between sharpen and blur. So if the thing that you are focused on is in sharp focus and the background is blurred out, then it stands out much more. Now, normally at this point, what you might do is go in and if I go to blur, Gaussian blur, something like that. I don't want to kind of go overdo it, so maybe I do something just a little bit like that. And then I suppose if I duplicate just that mask, no, that's not quite what I meant to do. Take that off. In fact, it's the opposite kind of thing. Just here, with this again, I would sort of create a mask. Sorry, clicking the right button here. Coffee's starting to wear off. And then you kind of paint the bird back in. And now that however, having said that, this is a much more difficult one to do without it. And the reality is, it already is blurred in the background. The only thing that's actually in focus, we've got this twig in the foreground, we've got the bird, and we've got the branch that it's standing on. The background is already blurred. So in this case, you kind of got it already. So you don't need to do that. So we've got the sharpening, the lightening and the darkening. We've got the sharpening and the blur. So these are two different ways. So what's the third way? The third way is to do a kind of color contrast. So if let's just copy all that onto a separate layer. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that layer. So let's say what I want to do is if I go to, we'll go to Camera Raw here, and supposing I want to give this a yellow shift. Now, I might do it subtly. I'm just going to exaggerate slightly, a little bit more than I comfortably would. Okay, so I'm going to give this one a yellow shift, but then what I'm also going to do on the layer below, which is an identical layer, I'm going to give it a blue shift. So let's go to Camera Raw here and just drop the temperature a little bit here, take this down to that. Okay, and then what I do is if I mask that off, in fact actually let's just turn that black there. So we've now got a blue shift, and then likewise in the mask I just paint this back in so it's got that more kind of yellow shift golden. And for that matter, if we want, we can touch in these bits of moss on the tree as well, and it almost kind of looks a little bit like the sun is kind of just lightly catching these bits here. So as well as then the let me just tell you what, let's just group those two together, and then we can remove that. So you can see that by bluishing, shifting the background into a slight blue, the foreground into a slight yellow, we're kind of creating a color contrast there as well. So color contrast, light contrast, and blur versus sharpness contrast. These are essentially so in order to make anything stand out, it's the idea of contrasting, and those are three different ways that you can play with the contrast: light and dark, sharp and blurred, and blue shift, yellow shift, or purple shift, green shift, depending on the kind of thing you're doing. So really, I mean, I have to say, Rosemary, I liked the edits you'd done. I didn't think it was overdone. I thought you'd spent a lot of time working around how to get a nice subtle detail. The only other thing I would say slightly with the one that you've got, this is your edited version, is again, I think it's just slightly too dark. I would just want to, again, let's just open your final edit, the edit you're happy with. If I go to the histogram here, and if I go to levels, you can see here, sorry, I've opened this again. This is your version, your edited version. And if I go to the levels down on the right, you can see again, it's bunched up in the darks. There's very little in the lights. And if I just drag that over a little bit, we can just, you want to get it to the point you want, but maybe you can just lighten that up a touch. Obviously, we've got to be careful that you don't start blowing out the highlights here. And if you feel you have, maybe just get your brush down to something like 20% or something like that, and just lightly kind of come back in where if you think you're starting to lose the highlights and some of the brighter feathers there, just do that. But that allows you to kind of brighten up a little bit. And again, if you really feel that, you can always kind of just darken down any over highlights in the background if you think that's too much. But overall, I think it's quite a nice, it's quite a lovely edit. But you could, I mean, there is a whole slight yellow shift on this, and maybe a little bit more touch blue in the background or on parts of the bark, just to kind of contrast a little bit, I think would maybe help you there. So I hope that gives you some ideas, Rosemary. Right, let me just close down a couple of windows here. All right. Okay, so we have a few more comments. Maggie says, a beautiful bird. And Maybrit also says it's lovely. So does VG. Rosemary says, thanks to everyone, and she likes the idea of the blue-yellow colour shift. Hadn't thought of that. And Roy's making an early runner because he's got a grandson's birthday party to get to. Okay, well, make sure you come back and watch. Yeah, because don't forget, I mean, here we are on YouTube. I do record all of these, so if you do have to run off at any point, or if there's very rare occasions when you really can't make the live one, go to youtube.com/Kim Ayres, and you can find all the backlog. These are all recorded, so all previous 114 episodes are there. And if you haven't done already, make sure you subscribe. Not just subscribe, find the little notification bell so that you know when new ones are coming up. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the critique section. So a reminder then for next week and the week after. So in 2 weeks' time will be the self-portrait challenge, or the selfie challenge, where what I want is for you to take a photo of yourself. Now, I know I know it's one you want to run away from. Most of you will want to run away. Oh, don't know that I really want to play with that. Self-portraits, I think, are the most difficult thing for most photographers to do. Because I'm wanting to go beyond. So I don't want you just to sort of do a quick kind of, there's me, a selfie. I want you to be a little bit more creative than that. The problem with self-portraits are twofold. One, technical, is that bit of light. You can't look through the camera at the same time you're trying to see yourself. So if you've got to sort of set a timer and run round, it's only when you go back again do you realise whether you've got it in focus, whether you're balanced in the right place, whether you're putting a funny expression or blinking or anything like that. So there's technical difficulty to it. But I also think actually the bigger part of it is the problem of the emotional side of it. If we're doing a self-portrait, what we're doing is we're putting a picture of ourselves out into the world, and we're kind of we're saying this is how we wish to be seen. And that kind of makes us feel vulnerable, because then what happens if somebody else laughs at it? Then we're going to feel absolutely terrible. But with this one, there's going to be no laughs unless they're intentional. Okay, if you want to have, I want you to have fun with this. Okay, maybe play a character. I mean, when I did that ultimate selfie there, I was playing the character of, hey, we're going to pose here with big fancy coat and sunshades, and I just took on the role. It was a little bit of acting fun, a little bit of theatre, right? And then, hey, let's play the photographer, where stick on the cap and then put the cap backwards and do 3 or 4 versions of me taking photos, and have a little me wearing my glasses, adjusting the lighting in the background. I was having fun with it, and I want you to have fun with it too. But next week, I'm not going to just sort of leave this and abandon you completely to it. Next week, in episode 116, I'm going to deep dive a bit more into this notion of self-portraits. I'm going to give you examples. I'm going to talk through some of the technical aspects to take into consideration, but also some of these emotional aspects and some creative ideas of how to play around with it and have a little bit more fun with it. So this is what I want from you. I really want you to take part. This is going to take most of you well out of your comfort zone. But if you're really genuinely wanting to improve your understanding of photography, I think there's a huge amount to be learnt in the idea of playing with self-portraiture. You also have the great idea, this is a chance to get to understand portraiture without having to worry about anybody else's feelings. Okay, you don't have to worry about, it's not like you're taking a photo of your parents or your partner or your kids or your friends and they might get upset with you because they don't like it. You can take as many of these as you want until you get one that you like. So I know I'm trying the hard sell here, and I'll be doing the hard sell on you next week, because I'm desperate to see as many of you really go for it as you possibly can. So that basically brings us to the conclusion for this. Jackie says thanks for a fun episode, and Viji says she's looking forward to the challenge as well. Excellent. So hope you enjoy the next. Have a start having a think about it. Like I said, if you have questions, stick questions into the Facebook group, the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. It's not just me. Sometimes people have been putting images in, and other people have been coming in with great ideas and thoughts and feedback as well. If you have questions about the self-portrait or things you want to explore, use the group. Use your peer group. Everybody who's taking part in this wants to be able to help each other as well. It's not just one way. It's not just top down. It's not just me telling you what to do. You've got the support of all your friends that you've been building up in the group from across the world over the last however many months you've been involved with this group. So tap into that resource as well. So, like I say, that's us now. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and there will be a critique section as well. So if you've got a couple of images, if anybody's got an image that they want feedback in, make sure you get that in as well. Have fun, enjoy your week, and I hope anybody who's in Britain hitting the heat wave don't melt. Do what you can. Take care. Cheerio.